Lucy Rees comes originally from Wales, and she is a worldwide renowned ethologist and specialized on horse behavior. 20 years ago she came to Spain to demonstrate learning methods, how to achieve a relationship with the horse in which he or she can learn happily to be well with people. We found her in Extremadura, in the middle of nowhere, with 50 horses. Lucy, what are you doing here?
Having a nice time. No, I seriously, this is a project that I've got to have a population of wild horses. These are Basque Pachocas. It's a very ancient breed. It's an Ice Age breed, and very little touched by domestication. To see what is the natural behaviour of horses, because there's an awful lot of misinformation going around, and I think people should be able to come and have a look and study for themselves and learn a bit of ethology too.
You have enough space here for the horses?
I've got over 1,000 hectares.
Okay. And you have water, and what do the horses need here in the so say wild?
Space. Space. If they'll find food if they've got space. There isn't. This is one of the best bits. There is actually grass here, but most of it isn't any grass. It's rock and it's heather and it's. But they find things to eat.
And you are doing something with the horses?
We're observing them. I don't do anything. We don't feed them. I don't worm them. I don't touch them. Well, I have put GPS on a couple, but apart from that, no. I don't interfere with them at all, because the whole point is to have a population that's really genuinely wild.
And what's happening if somebody is hurt?
If they were hurt badly enough that I had to interfere, then I would, but I would take them out of the population. But that's never happened. They've had injuries, and they simply cure themselves. They're immensely healthy.
There is the vegetation around here is very rich in various sort of herbs and
Yes.
and sort of you have oak trees and you have chestnut trees and
I think that's how they worm themselves, is on acorns and chestnuts.
so they cure actually themselves if something.
Yeah, they do. They do. They always have done, and they've had quite severe injuries, and they get on fine. They cure themselves faster than a vet could, because they're healthy. I think people don't realise that the conditions in which most domestic horses live are pretty stressful. They're pretty far away from the natural. That's stress. Stress lowers your resistance to disease. It increases healing times, all those things. You know, it's the same as in us. You know?
Yeah.
If you're stressed, you get ill.
Exactly.
They do too.
We did spend now almost a week with you at this wonderful center what you have here, which I think is an old place. No, it was before here on the finca. It's a sort of a shepherd.
It's where the goat herds used to come up for the summer.
Okay.
And stay for the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were very close with the horses. We had their breakfast, and then they came along with their foals and.
Coming along.
Yeah. And very calm and very peaceful, and we looked at them out there at the end of the world.
I think it's very necessary. People look at horses, but they don't really observe them. They don't see in detail what they're doing. What they do more than anything else is eat. because
But
there's
what
not an
does
awful
it
lot
mean,
of food.
eat?
Graze.
I mean, we learned that grazing is, I was amazed by that there are so many things involved only
Yes.
in grazing. It's not just grazing and taking the grass in and filling your stomach up. There are so many things involved, no, with grazing.
Yes, well, if you look at it, the first thing they do is they look around and they select what they're going to eat. And they move their upper lip a lot, separating the good from the bad, which they can recognise, which they've learnt which ones are good and which ones aren't. Then they get hold of it in their teeth, and they do a little jerk with their head like that to break it off. And all the time they're doing that, they're also walking forward. They graze round one foot and then they graze round the other foot. When you've got a horse in a stable or even in a corral and you give him food, he doesn't have to go anywhere. He doesn't have to look for anything. He doesn't have to learn anything either, because all the food you give him is automatically good.
No selection also.
No selection.
He doesn't say this
he doesn't
is good
have
and
to
this is bad.
do this with his nose, and he doesn't do that little jerk with his head. Now, and he hasn't very often he hasn't got his head down. At least not for the amount of time that these ones have. These will be grazing about 15 hours a day, something like that, in every 24. A horse that you're giving food to is, you're talking about 2 hours a day or something like that. And very often not with the head down. So what does the head down do? It stretches the back. So the back is all the time stretched, relaxed. The other thing they're doing is they're turning around and knocking the flies off themselves. What does all this mean? It means that when you don't give a horse those opportunities, if he's stuck in a stable, they start to get manias for doing things with their lips, because they haven't got enough work for their lips. And so they start fiddling with things. They don't do this little jerk with the head, so they get very stuck in the pole. There's an awful lot of pole problems with horses. Not just because people put too much pressure on the rein, but also simply because they don't have the exercise that these ones do. These ones are moving constantly. The gut doesn't move because you're not moving with it. If you take away this pattern of eating that side and eating that side, if you imagine I'm stopped in front, it's this movement, and then if I do it more frantic because I'm nervous, stressed, then you end up with weaving. So you end up with an awful lot of aberrant behaviour for taking away what is their natural behaviour. And the details, like you say, in that are actually quite extraordinary, how all this adds up. And how you probably know something about horses in stables, you've probably seen all these problems arise.
Yeah,
and they have a lot of back problems too, because they never go around with their heads down. They have a lot of digestive problems because their guts aren't moving all the time.
So what can we do to make our horses, I say our horses, domestic horses, more happy? Because of course we don't have the opportunity to have them in a herd like that with, or in the bands, you know, you were talking about bands, you know, like sort of...
This is a band, yeah. Well, I think one of them's gone off over there, but yeah.
So a band, normally there is the stallion.
That's the stallion, yeah.
Okay. What's his name?
Belt.
You know all the names of the 50 horses, of course.
Yes.
And you get the names from the Basque land.
Yes.
So they're original.
Yes, they're Basque ponies. They've got to have
Basque name.
Belt means black.
Okay, that's Bells. That's Bells with his band. So how many
Well,
more?
he's got another mare over there. She's separated.
Okay. She went into the sun, to sunbathe a little bit. So of course we don't have the opportunity to provide them, I say, horse paradise, but perhaps we can do something, you know, to make them more happy, or to
Yes.
I think what my personal opinion is, the first thing what we have to do is to observe them, and we have the opportunity here in Pironal, in Extremadura, on this very big space, to observe them in their natural behavior. And then we know what they need and how they behave.
And maybe you can find, if we can't offer them perfect conditions, then perhaps you could find substitutes, or find out what is necessary for them.
Yeah. So there are some main points, or some what you say, this is really necessary, or this is the most necessary, or there are some points you can say, you really, if you want to have a horse, or if you have a horse, you should have this and this, otherwise it's not possible to have a horse. I think you talked about free.
Yes, basically it's grazing, and that goes on, as I say, for 16 hours a day. Company, they don't live alone. They live in company, and that means being together, touching each other, moving around each other. It doesn't mean just standing in a stable looking at other horses bored in other stables over there. It's actually interacting with them. And thirdly, liberty. They need to move. They're animals of movement. They move almost all the time. So, how are you going to do that? Well, one thing is, I think the time will come when it will actually be regarded as cruelty to keep a horse in a stable. And it should do. Should be considered.
Yes.
Because you deprive them of so many things. We do know from studies that stables with bars are less stressful than stables with the walls right up to the ceiling. Stables that you can't put your head out of at all are absolute nightmare. But they shouldn't be in stables. They should at least be or have the opportunity to go out and be together 8 hours a day at least. Why not? We've got to slow down their eating times and make more work for the mouth. Things called slow feeders are very good. Even, and funnily enough, they seem to have caught on in paddocks, but not in stables. But it would be much better in a stable. It's terribly bad for a horse to be 12 hours without anything in his stomach, because his stomach is made for continuous input practically. Well, they rest and for an hour every now and then they move, and then they eat again. But they don't go without anything in their stomach, and horses, domestic horses, very often do. And the constant production of acid simply eats holes in their stomachs. They're called ulcers. Well, it depends exactly what they're doing as well, because the stress increases acid production, as it does in us. But it's running at about 75% of horses in stables have ulcers in their stomach. How can they feel all right like that? My grandfather had an ulcer, and when it was complaining, you had to keep out the way. Is that a source of bad temper for horses, or what? And then what do they get? A slap over the face.
And when we say they are aggressive animals, and they're, I think, well, what I saw here is, and what we know, they're the most peaceful animals of the world.
Well, they don't want trouble, do they? I mean, they're prey animals, for heaven's sake. They don't want conflict. They're not interested in that. I think another of the things that this really teaches to people is that all this business about hierarchies and who's the boss and who's telling the others what to do is completely human. It has nothing to do with horses. They really don't understand that. They don't have bosses or hierarchies or even fixed leaders. One of them moves and the other one, they like staying together. So when one of them moves, the others tend to move with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be anyone that moves first.
Yeah.
And most of the basis of training has been teach the horse who's master. It's always been assumed that the horse understood what that meant.
Yeah.
And nobody seems to have questioned, you know, do they actually understand the concept of who's master?
Yeah.
I think more and more people are realising that this dominance idea really doesn't hold. But unfortunately, it's usually the first thing you get taught in a riding school. You've got to make the horse do what you want. And then you learn bit by bit to be a bit softer with it, with luck. But that idea is actually so destructive to horses. There's a very good paper recently by Sue Dyson of the Newmarket of ridden horses, showing that most of what is taught to be resistance, which means resistance to what you want him to do, resistance to your authority, is not anything to do with that. It's to do with pain. So how many horses are forced through until the person is actually applying more pain than the pain that he's originally suffering, and then maybe he'll do what you want, and you feel, now I've won a point. What you've done is simply increase the damage to your horse. So an awful lot of horses end up with quite severe damage to their backs, to their mostly to their backs, but to their legs as well, to their mouths, to their poor heads, by nobody ever having simply listened when he says, I don't want to do that movement because it hurts. Huh?
Yes.
And obviously, if you go on doing it, you're going to create a lot of damage to the horse.
Definitely, yeah.
Yes, synchrony. Horses move in synchrony with each other, and they move in synchrony with us too. But the first thing that you've got to achieve is that the horse wants to be with you. Not because you're giving carrots, but simply because you're nice. You're interesting company. You do interesting things. You touch him in a way that he likes to be touched. Once you can convince a horse that he's safe with you, then he wants to synchronize with you. And that's how it works in riding too.
Yeah.
But of course, if what you're going to do is to put a metal bit in his mouth and pull at his mouth, he's not going to want to be with you. Okay.
And about this subject, well, it's one of the subjects in your new book, which is called, I think you have a book over there,
Horses in Company, it's called.
Yes.
Yes, this is a book that proposes, from studies I did in Venezuela, it proposes a completely different idea about what horse society is. And instead of this idea about hierarchies, well, what I saw in Venezuela, where the horses lived with puma.
With a predator.
Yeah. So they had quite a lot of surprises and runnings away. And what I saw quite clearly is when they run away, they're like fish. They just go together like that.
In synchrony.
In synchrony. But not colliding. And nobody, whoever runs fastest is in front, and maybe somebody else runs faster after a bit. All the adult ones are further back. It's the 2-year-olds that run fastest. But they're not leaders in the sense that if the older ones decide to change direction, the younger ones in front will change direction to stay in front of them, like dogs do when we're out walking with them. Yeah? So it is actually synchrony, it's not leader.
So even if they flee and if they are in panic and they are afraid because of their lives, they are in a sort of harmony.
Yes, it's that flowing together. Actually, they do it more when they're afraid.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, an awful lot of very good show jumpers have commented on that. That they have horses that, you know, they're all right jumping at home. But when you get into competition, because of the pressure of the crowd and they're rather frightened, it seems that you just have to think where to go. You don't actually have to give them directions. They're so busy synchronizing with your body when you ride them.
Yes.
And I think that riding is about synchrony. It's about, if I have a good relationship with a horse, and we're friends, and we can lie about on each other like horses do when they're being friends and relaxing together, then if I say with my body I'm going that way, the horse goes that way. If I say with my body I'm stopping here, then the horse stops.
There's no pressure necessary.
No, a lot of the time there isn't. Sometimes you need pressure as a backup, because the horse simply would prefer to do something else today. No? Or if I'm riding a stallion past a field of mares, he's not going to be very interested in synchronising with me. So I am actually going to have some learnt signals.
To convince him.
Yeah, or simply say, no, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
And he'll go, but I want to, and I go, no, I'm sorry, you're not doing that. And after a bit he goes, well, okay, what are we doing then?
Yeah, okay.
That's fine. Yeah? But most of the time they don't, they're just happy to go along with things because they don't make up plans for themselves. They don't want to conquer the world. That was our idea.
What can we learn from horses?
How to live in company respecting the role of the other and not wanting to encroach on their space, on what they're doing, not want to tell them what to do. Sometimes maybe tell them what not to do, like don't bite my bottom, no? Or just don't tread on my toes. And that any one of those horses, or any one of us, could have a better idea at one moment, and maybe tomorrow it will be another one that has a better idea. Horses don't have fixed leaders. They don't. Sometimes you see a little foal goes off, and so its mother follows it, and then everybody goes, oh, we're going that way. A little foal. No? They don't mind. They don't mind, as long as they're not hungry or thirsty or frightened. They'll go where everybody, and when they're frightened, they all go together. So it's actually anarchy, but the best sort of anarchy, in which I respect your space, you respect my space. I know my responsibilities, and I don't foist them off on you or blame anybody else for not. I've got them, and I've got to learn what I've got to learn, and I've got to do what I've got to do. Just don't get in my way. Yeah? But when we've got problems, we join together and solve them together. And we've got the biggest problem in the world at the moment, is what we're doing with the world. If we could just get together, we could solve it, but we can't get together.
So we can learn a hell of a lot from the horses.
A hell of a lot.
And here, in Pironal, in this wonderful place, we can be with them. I think it's the best therapy of the world. We can learn. We can also learn to observe. And then we are guided by Lucy, And then we can see how we can solve the problems what we have at home with our horses, and which ways are there, and what is possible. And probably we also have to decide. For me, it's not possible to have a horse, but if I like horses, I can come here and I can be with them, and I can, in harmony, in peace, and in a wonderful nature. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thank you.